Hello, my loves. I am going to be doing a video on the third quarter. I totally skipped over the second because, we know the mid-year of the thing is the most popular, so you don't want to do that. I actually love the mid-year Rico tag, and not doing it for the second time this year just really devastated me. I really wanted to do it. Anyways, it's a little late. It's September, but we're going to talk about the books that I read. So in the first quarter, I actually did a thing where I went through all the check-in list. I've been doing that where I've been doing a check-in list, and I've been kind of going through each month. I'll kind of go through that, and then I'll go through my whole list because I kind of throw things at a lot at the wall, and lists make me happy. I like taking lists off, but I do think that I overestimated how much I'd be reading this year. I read like 20 books in September, but before that I was behind schedule, all things. I put on like 122 books, but like honestly, I read probably around 200 books each year, so that's kind of what I was assuming, and I'm now at 105 because I've been reading a lot. I've gone from like reading like 20 books a month to like July I read 3. A lot of them I read like 7 or 8, so it's just not as wide as I would like to. I guess we can start at April because I didn't do any of those. So in April, so everything I have a book by an Indigenous or Inuit author. I did not read one. Then we have a 20th century classic, and I did read one. A pre-1900 classic, I did read one. A collection of poetry, I did not. A Latinx author, I did not. A play or short story, I did. A history book, I did not. And then an own book, I did. And then May, I did fairly well. I read a book by an Indigenous author. I did not read a 20th century book, other than I have a note there that I read the entire collection of the New York Times book review, which was beautiful, which included a lot of experts and discussion on 20th century literature. So if you want to count that, I did read a book about a lot of 20th century, but I did not read a book that was published then. And then we have a pre-19th century classic, which I did, a collection of poetry, which I did, a Latinx author, I did not, which I have been embarrassingly bad at that. I am kind of ashamed of myself. Like, that was for my goals, to try to highlight those voices more, because I have not been as good at reading them in the past. And Latinx authors, I continue to not really read throughout this year. It's a thing of like, when I'm not reading very well, I'm not highlighting the voices that I want to read. And I want to, whether I'm reading lots of books or reading not very many books, to still prioritize books that are diverse. And then a play and short story, I did read one. A history book, I did. And then an own book, I did. And then into June, I did everything but a history book. And then in July, I also did pretty good, actually. I read a history book here too, I didn't realize. In July, I did everything but a collection of poetry or a history, or an... Oh! Oh no. I was like, I read everything. I was like, July is a book where I only read 3 books. Yeah. So I only read a collection of poetry and an own book, which might be with me in the same collection. Yeah, no, I did not do anything in July. That's not surprising. But August, I did do all of them, and I was so proud of myself. So yeah, I read an Indigenous author, I read a 20th century classic, I read a pre-19th century classic, I read a collection of poetry, a Latinx author, a play or short story, a history book, and an own book. There we go, darling. And then September, it was a little bit mixed. I read a book by an Indigenous author, I read a 20th century classic, I did not read a pre-19th century classic, and a collection of poetry I did not read either. I read a Latinx book. Olga Dies Dreaming is such a great book, you should read it. And then a play or short story I did not read. A history book I did read, and an own book I did not read. I read like 20 books in September, and I did not read an own book. Like, I need to be better at reading these books around me. A lot of these books that are actually around me I read, but a lot of the other ones I haven't. Now we're going to jump all the way down to my main goals. And again, these are not going to be as significant as I would like because of the fact that I've not been reading the same volume of books. So my first goal on here is to read 5 books published in the 18th century. And I read 1. Then I have read 4 books published in the 16th century, which I haven't, although I have now seen 3 Shakespearean plays. So I do plan on kind of rereading them. If you count going to the theater and like paying close attention to them, I've read 3. Read 8 plays, I've read 5. I have been enjoying plays so well, and I'm so glad that I put this on the list. And I'm even thinking about like doing something play-centric on my channel because I love them so much. And then I have finished 100 years in books for 20th century. I really, really want to do that, and it's a video I plan to make at the beginning, and I really want to do really well on the video, so I haven't actually filmed it yet, and I need to. But I have been like, chiseling away with that, and I don't think I'll be done all of them, but I have, I think, 22 books more to read for it. It's pretty much a challenge in which I want to read a book that was published every single year from 1900 to 1999. And then I kind of want to do it forever, but it becomes much harder when we get into like, I think I could do it for the 19th century as well. I don't think I could do it for the 1700s. There just isn't enough books published in, collection or in circulation to do that, but it would be really cool to do it. Read a book from 6 continents, which I'm really, really happy. So I said that I couldn't read No books that I read from Canada, the UK, or the US would read for that. So for North America, I had to read something that was not from Canada or the US, and in Europe, I had to read something that was not from the UK. And I read 5 of the 6 continents. I've not read anything from Australia or Oceania, but I have read a book that was from Mexico, a book from Chile, a book from Japan, a book from Denmark, Norway, and Zimbabwe. I would like to read more international books around the world in general, but I'm really glad that I did the prompt because it's been really fun, and I need to read an Australian book, so if you have recommendations, please give it to me. And then this one I have not done well. It is read 11 books by African authors and at least from 6 different countries. And I have read 1, the Zimbabwe one. Maybe 2. Yeah, I'm not super proud of that. I really wanted to read more African literature because I read a lot last year. Well, I read like 6 last year and it was delightful. So that is something that I will re-examine for 2023. And then we have participate in the Giller, Booker, and Canada Reads, as well as Women's Prize, and I said I'm on track with that. I've pretty much done that. Canada Reads, I did not. Canada Reads was weird this year. I don't know why. And then participate in the Native Reading Challenge. It's really interesting prompts, and I always enjoy prompts. I think they're really helpful. I think that I'm doing fairly well at that, and I'll be reading more Indigenous books before the end of the year, and I will look up what the exact prompts are there for that. Next one is to read 25 books by Indigenous authors, and I read 13. Read 20 books by Latinx authors, and I read 5. So that's what I'm talking about. I've read half of one on average each month, and that's not the kind of reading I want. I want to be much more intentional with reading Latinx books. And then I said have at least 50% of authors of color. This is a very loose thing, but just making sure that like I'm not primarily reading a bunch of white authors. Read 40 owned books. I read 11, guys. Aren't you proud? So proud. Read 4 books over 700 pages. This is one that I'm none for, but I read David Copperfield, and I think the Merit customers would count, and I'm gonna read Middlemarch. So I think I actually might accomplish this in October, but I did not do it in the 3rd quarter. Read 20 translated books, and I read 7, which, considering my numbers are currently less than half of last year's, I'm not upset. I think 7 translated books is pretty good. And then we have read 40 classics, and I read 28. If we look at the circulation of how many books I thought I would read, like 28, 30. I think I've actually read now 30. It's a little bit into October and I'm reading Victorian books all month, but I definitely think that that's kind of the number I want to read. I really enjoy classic books. And then we have read 30 nonfiction, I've read 17. Read 20 middle grade books, and I read 13. 7 picture books, and I read 9. I've really enjoyed reading picture books this year, and it's been really delightful. 3 books about art, I've read 1, and read 15 science fiction books. I've read 6. I really love science fiction, and when I was first had my channel, I read like a lot of science fiction. Like I think like 2018, 2019, like one of my highest things was science fiction, and now it's 6. So I would definitely like to be reading more, and I need to be more active about that as well. And then we have read 15 short stories. I've read 4. I've done that pretty well at the beginning of the year, but I've definitely fallen off that as well. Read 20 collections of poetry. I've read 6. Again, not ridiculously low, but not as high as I would like. And that is my list. Let me know how you are doing about books if you enjoy this. This was definitely very casual, and I'm just kind of talking about the things that I've read and where I am. I don't think that goals always have to be accomplished. It's just more mindfulness for me. Like I really enjoy being mindful about the books that I'm reading and thinking about them. And I don't know, I like checking off lists. Let me know if you have goals, how you felt about your goals. Do you get discouraged? Like I try not to get discouraged because like when I first did my check-in, I had read I think 30 books in all of January, February, and March, which I have now read 105, and we're just in the beginning of October. So like I was like really behind, and then I had like delightful times in which I read lots of books. So there is lots of time to read and enjoy and all of that. And yeah, I will be seeing you next time. Let me know what you think about numbers and math and everything sparkly. If you made it this far, leave a like pencil. I think there's a pencil emoji. I don't know. I love these things.